The morning of September 11th, 2001, dawned with a crystalline clarity that seemed almost poetic along the eastern seaboard of the United States. The sky was a vast, untroubled azure, a perfect late summer canvas. In Boston, at Logan International Airport, the routines of modern travel hummed with mundane predictability. Passengers queued, coffee was sipped, boarding passes were scanned. Among them were men whose hearts beat not with the anticipation of reunion or vacation, but with a cold, fanatical resolve. They moved through the crowds unnoticed, their carry-on luggage holding the simplest and most devastating of tools, box cutters. Their target was not a military installation or a political headquarters, but the very symbols of American economic, military, and global power. This was not a battle in a conventional war, but the opening salvo in a new, shadowy conflict that would redefine the 21st century. The architect of this chaos was not a general in a command bunker, but a wealthy, ideologically driven Saudi exile watching from a mountain range half a world away, Osama Bin Laden. To understand the magnitude of that September day, one must journey back into the complex, dusty trails of Afghanistan and the shifting sands of Middle Eastern politics. Osama bin Laden, the 17th of 52 children of a billionaire construction magnate, was born into immense privilege in 1957. He was a shy, pious young man who renounced his family's lavish lifestyle for austere interpretation of Islam. The Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 became his crucible. With significant financial and logistical backing from the United States CIA and Saudi Arabia's intelligence services, Bin Laden became a key figure in funneling money, weapons, and Arab mujahideen, holy warriors, to fight the communist invaders. In the rugged mountains of Tora Bora, he built tunnels and bunkers, and it was here he first conceived of al-Qaeda, the base, in 1988. It was meant to be a legion of veteran fighters, a database of holy warriors, to be deployed for future jihads. The Americans were his allies then, a fact steeped in tragic irony. When the Soviets withdrew in 1989, a victory Bin Laden believed was divinely ordained. He returned to Saudi Arabia a hero, but his worldview soon collided with reality. In 1990, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, Bin Laden was outraged by the Saudi royal family's decision to allow infidel American troops to be stationed on sacred Saudi soil, home to Islam's two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. He offered his mujahideen to defend the kingdom, but his offer was spurned. This was his first great betrayal. Expelled from Saudi Arabia, he found refuge in Sudan, where al-Qaeda began to take shape as a global terrorist network, issuing its first fatwa, a religious edict against the U.S. in 1992 for its support of Israel and its presence in the Arabian Peninsula. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which killed 6, was an early, crude warning shot, carried out by individuals inspired by, but not directly controlled by, Bin Laden. It was from this new headquarters that Bin Laden declared a full-scale war. In 1996, he issued a public declaration of war against the Americans occupying the land of the two holy mosques. His rhetoric was fiery, filled with grievances about Palestine, the sanctions on Iraq which he claimed killed hundreds of thousands of children, and the continued U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia. In 1998, he merged al-Qaeda with other jihadist groups to form the World Islamic Front for Jihad against Jews and Crusaders, and the fatwa that followed was chillingly clear. The ruling to kill the Americans and their allies, civilians and military, is an individual duty for every Muslim who can do it in any country in which it is possible to do it. The U.S. intelligence community was aware of him, of course. He was a financier, an ideologue, a sponsor of terror. But few in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. could conceive that this man, hiding in primitive conditions, could pose an existential threat to the world's sole superpower. This was the critical miscalculation. The plan for 9/11, known to the hijackers as the Holy Tuesday operation, was audacious in its simplicity and scale. The mastermind was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a Pakistani terrorist who first pitched the idea of using planes as missiles to Bin Laden in the mid-1990s. Bin Laden gave his approval, and the meticulous recruitment and training began. The 19 hijackers were mostly Saudi nationals, young, educated, and able to blend into Western society. They learned English, studied flight manuals, and took lessons at small aviation schools in the United States. Their communication was clandestine, using coded messages, encrypted emails, and couriers. The CIA and FBI, hampered by a notorious lack of communication and a wall that prevented the sharing of intelligence between domestic and foreign agencies, saw fragments of the picture but could not assemble the mosaic. In August 2001, the president's daily brief was titled, "Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S." It was a stark warning that landed in a sea of other threats and bureaucratic inertia. The storm was coming, and America was looking the wrong way. The morning of September 11th unfolded with a horrifying, methodical precision. At 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Boston for Los Angeles. 5 hijackers were on board, led by Mohammed Atta. About 15 minutes into the flight, they stormed the cockpit, using box cutters and mace to subdue the crew and passengers. Atta, a coldly efficient and educated man from Egypt, took control of the aircraft. At 8:46 a.m., as millions in New York began their workdays, the Boeing 767, loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel, was deliberately flown into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The impact was a thunderous, fireball-erupting cataclysm seen live on television by millions. The initial reaction was one of stunned disbelief. A terrible accident, a navigational error, these were the first hopeful thoughts. Then, at 9:03 a.m., as news cameras were fixed on the burning North Tower, United Airlines Flight 175, also from Boston, sliced into the South Tower. In that moment, all doubt vanished. America was under attack. The scenes of chaos in Lower Manhattan were apocalyptic. The streets were showered with a blizzard of glass and burning paper. People stumbled, covered in gray dust, their faces masks of shock and terror. And then the unthinkable began to happen. The intense heat from the burning jet fuel, estimated to be over 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, weakened the steel structural supports of the towers. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower, struck second, collapsed first in a terrifying rolling cloud of dust and debris that chased survivors through the canyons of the city. 29 minutes later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower followed. The iconic twin symbols of New York's financial might were reduced to a smoldering, 6-story-high pile of rubble, entombing nearly 2,800 people. But the horror was not confined to New York. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, which had taken off from Washington Dulles, was flown into the western face of the Pentagon, the very headquarters of the U.S. military. A wing of the building was gutted, and 184 people perished. The message was clear: your military might cannot protect you. A fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, took off from Newark bound for San Francisco. Its hijacking, however, did not go as planned. Through phone calls to loved ones, the passengers and crew learned the fate of the other planes. They realized this was not a conventional hijacking but a suicide mission. In one of the most heroic acts in American history, they voted and decided to fight back. Todd Beamer's words, heard over an airphone, became a national rallying cry. "Are you guys ready? Let's roll." The passengers stormed the cockpit. In the ensuing struggle, the plane, targeting either the U.S. Capitol or the White House, pitched and rolled before crashing into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. All 44 people on board died, but they had thwarted the hijackers' plan, their bravery saving an untold number of lives on the ground. In the immediate aftermath, a stunned silence fell over the nation, followed by a surge of unity and resolve. President George W. Bush, speaking from the rugged days later with a bullhorn, famously declared, "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The investigation began immediately, the evidence point unequivocally to al-Qaeda. The FBI quickly identified the hijackers from the passenger manifests. The trail led back to the training camps of Afghanistan. On September 20th, President Bush addressed a joint session of Congress and declared a war on terror, stating, "Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists." The world had chosen sides. The target was the Taliban regime for harboring Bin Laden when they refused to hand him over. Operation Enduring Freedom began on October 7, 2001, with a massive bombing campaign and the insertion of CIA paramilitary officers and U.S. Special Forces to work with the Afghan Northern Alliance. The manhunt for Osama bin Laden became the longest and most expensive in history. He vanished into the mountains of Tora Bora in late 2001, where a fierce battle raged. Many believe he slipped away due to a reliance on unreliable local Afghan militias instead of committing a larger force of U.S. troops. For the next decade he became a ghost, communicating only through low-tech, hand-delivered audio and videotapes. His message evolved, urging further attacks and commenting on world events. The U.S. intelligence community pursued countless leads, but bin Laden's security was meticulous. He used no electronic devices, and his communication relied on a network of trusted couriers. After years of interrogation, CIA analysts identified the pseudonym of a key courier. Tracking him led them to a peculiar compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, a garrison town home to a major military academy. It was, analysts concluded, custom-built to hide someone of high value. The decision to act fell to President Barack Obama. The options were a bombing raid, which would destroy evidence and leave no definitive proof of bin Laden's death, or a high-risk helicopter assault deep into sovereign Pakistani territory.